all of our brokers tell us, oh my gosh, call your past clients, call your database, but then they don't.
And you're like, about
Like, well, what the hell do I say?
be in relationship, not just be a random realtor with data spewing at them all the time.
Hey everybody, thank you for tuning in today. I am super stoked for our guest today. So one of my absolute best friends, realtor named Ashley in Grand Rapids, told me about an awesome agent she heard speak at an event she went to last year. And I've been trying to get in touch with her, but she's one of the busiest and most successful agents in the area right now. So I'm super excited to announce Sasha Tripp is with us today from Charlottesville, Virginia. Welcome, Sasha.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. I'm so excited we finally got connected.
Yeah, so you have a lot of exciting stuff. And I mean, top producing agent, you're the broker, everyone in town knows you. But I really like that you have some serious brand behind what you do that you've been building up over the last 10 years. So why don't we start? You told me when we chatted before, you got into the business in 2007 because you wanted to learn more about the process of real estate yourself. Tell us your origin story so people can kind of develop an appreciation for like where you started.
Yeah, it's not super glamorous. I graduated from the University of Virginia in 2005 and had a little 1-year stint with a staffing firm, short and sweet, didn't love it, but met a lot of company owners in town and sort of got the lay of the land and realized I was going to have to start my own company to make a living in Charlottesville because we had so many academics. Like I was a religious studies major, so everyone was a little more qualified than me. So I learned a little bit about that. I kind of fell into real estate. I was telling you I wanted to buy a house and I realized I knew nothing about like budgeting, mortgage payments, home ownership, home maintenance. So I took the class and I passed the test and I was like, well, I might as well go sit for my license. So I got my license and then it was like, well, I might as well hang my license because why not? So I hung my license and then around that time kind of just got burned out at my job and decided, well, let's give this a go. And of course that ended up being 2007, which was probably historically one of the 2 worst years in our market here. So a horrible time to start in real estate. But as I was saying to you, it just gave me a ton of time to learn and, do the background work in my area.
So let's talk about that for a second, because I know so many people probably listening to this got into the business like in the last 9 months. And they're probably all saying, oh my gosh, Sasha, I relate to you because I think this is the worst market we've ever had. Now, the market is great. The market's terrible. It's all about your outlook on things.
Worse, but this is not.
It's not the same in a million different ways. But, how did you spend your time when there was all that? I think one thing that's in common is there was fear in the market then, and there's fear in the market now, in the consumer mindset. So how did you spend your time during those, fear-based years, and kind of what were some of the things that you learned or that you did that you think, wow, that really paved the way for the business that you do now?
Yeah, so that's a great question. And I actually talk about it to people quite often now because it is very similar. And I won't compare hardships. Both markets have been tough. But yeah, so I just spent a ton of time learning. So I decided like, if I didn't have anyone to sell houses to, I might as well figure this craft out so that when people became available to sell houses to, or I had developed a sphere of influence, I will actually know what I'm talking about. So I really went back and forth between just a couple of things. First, it was like, learn the area, learn the neighborhoods, learn real estate, like learn how a home is built, learn the common problems of homes. But I feel like I was trained really well, or I was taught that like, you can't just learn, like you can't just keep getting ready to get ready. You have to actually go do things sometimes. And so I realized early on, I needed to be constantly networking and making connections. And so I would go to every event in town. I volunteered for tons of nonprofits. I made myself like an ambassador at our Chamber of Commerce, which meant I sat at like the table and I greeted every new person and I learned their names and they saw who I was. So I would just do anything that I could find that would put me in front of people. And I think people started associating like Sasha and real estate. They had no idea that I had never sold a house. They just had so much exposure. I was sort of like omnipresent, always around. I think people thought I was a really good real estate agent, whether I had had any experience or not. And there were times like I would do, I'd sit at a coffee shop and I would schedule an appointment for 8, 8:30, 9, 9:30, 10, 10:30, 11, 11:30, take a little lunch break and then go through the afternoon the same way. I would schedule 20-minute coffee appointments at 30 minutes apart and tell people like, oh, this is just to get to know you, get to know if we might want to work together more. And I just exposed myself to as many people as I possibly could. And then, of course, in the background, I was constantly learning, creating checklists, creating systems. So I was ready to roll.
You just said a lot of stuff that I feel like we have to unpack because you said it quickly, and I really want people to understand some of these. So number one, don't, if you're a new agent or if you're trying to get busier, right? Like maybe you've been in the business forever, but you're slow this year. Don't fall to the curse of like death by training. I think so many of like the big brokerages in the country right now. I mean, if you wanted to train for 40 hours a week as a realtor, you could, right?
Yeah, it's like, even now, like 15 years in the business, forever.
Yeah, there's never any training. I think training has its place and it's important when you know what you want to get out of it, right? Like when you want to learn a specific new skill. But what you said that I thought was impactful is you spent your time learning and training yourself on the market, on your community, on real estate, so that when you got into those conversations, you had something intelligent to say. And then your number two thing, which like for everyone listening, like this is the thing, right? Like we've heard this on the podcast before. She spent all week networking and trying to make new friends, trying to meet new people. And then conversation happens. She has all this new real estate knowledge to share with them. And then the real closer is, let's set 20 coffee meetings for the next week in a way that like fits into her schedule in an intelligent way, rather than doing like one coffee like every third day at a different time.
Task switching, constantly commuting in your car. Yeah, I think I learned really early efficiency and like group, like batching tasks of the same type was really important because we waste so much time task switching between, what hat we're supposed to be wearing and prepping. And even me, like as a female in this trade, it's like, am I even appropriately dressed? Like I can't go walk 50 acres in the rain, pouring rain and in mud, and then immediately go straight to Chamber of Commerce, business roundtable luncheon with all the biggest, company owners in town. Like, so thinking about how do I group things back to back so that my mind can be in one spot for a period of time. So yeah, I did that with networking, and then I did that with learning, and I just would not let either of them fill all my day.
So let's talk about this really quick. So obviously you're a likable person, but you mentioned in the call earlier that you are an introvert, right? So like you can be likable and you can kind of like choose to portray some extroverted tendencies. But I think a lot of people miss the connection between like you're out there in the community and then you meet someone, and then how do you get them to have coffee with you, right? Because and I would also love to hear your perspective on like how guys could do this. Because like I think sometimes like if a guy is like, "Hey, Sasha, you want to go grab a coffee?"
It's tough for females talking to guys. It's tough for males talking to females. It is tough. So there are some graces around it. But I will say, what I found is you go to all these events and people pass around business cards, and no one does anything with them. It's like they go straight in the trash can. Maybe you take some information off of them and put them in a database or whatever. But like just being the one person that actually shoots an email and says, "Oh, so nice to meet you today. I'm so curious about your company," or "I'd love to know more about your position." If it's very clear that you know what the company is, "I would love to know more about your position or a little bit more about your background or, what your big goals are for the year," whatever. I mean, something has to have sparked your interest. Like,
what a surprise here. Like your questions, your reach out to them is about them, right? Like most people,
this is like, is about them too.
The entire copy is about them.
Never talk about real estate. So when I was having those meetings, I think that's the key is people like you more the more time they get to talk about themselves with you, right? Like if you're just there spouting off all these fun facts about yourself and your company and how you can help and how you're the best real estate agent in the world, they're going to be super turned off. But if you do a copy, if you make an invite that is tied to like, I would love to learn more about you or your company or your obstacles this year, or somebody you're trying to hire for, some connection I could make for you. And then you take them to coffee and pay for coffee. That's a nice thing to do. And you ask them the whole time about themselves. And then at the very end, most people are kind of like, oh, it occurs to me I should ask you some questions too. And at the end, it's like, well, this wasn't a sales pitch. This wasn't me trying to close on anything. I wasn't going to try to press working with us. I just legitimately wanted to know more about you to see if like we might want to maintain a better business relationship and keep in better touch and maybe generate some business back and forth. And I think having this low barrier and then becoming known as a person that networks a lot but doesn't, isn't pushy, I think is really important. Like I'm never pushing someone, I'm never trying to sell anything. I'm just trying to build rapport and trust and relationships and then be top of mind when the time comes, right?
I love that. So after you have that coffee, what is your follow-up? So you have, 20 coffees in a week. Is it like an ad to your CRM? Is it a social media ad? Like what is do you have like processes and procedures, or do you kind of assess each one differently?
Each one is different because I will tell you, like, I am an introvert. And I'm at the place in my business now where I can be more selective about relationships. I think earlier on, it's like, you gotta, be friends with anyone who's going to be your friend because you beggars can't be choosers, right? Like you've got to work with whoever's out there when you're young and green and new. But there are still some people you go to coffee with and you're kind of like, I don't get a good vibe from this person. Like, they're too pushy or they're not super responsive or they're like they seem a little narcissistic or they're pretty arrogant or, like they just couldn't see any value in the other person in the conversation. And I think to myself, well, like, that's probably not someone I'm going to send my client to. I'm probably not going to refer them a lot. So this is probably not going to go anywhere. So for those people, it was like add them to the database, maybe add a few notes about what we talked about, but I'm not going to do a lot of follow-up with those people. The ones that I like and we hit it off and I'm like, oh, they're nice, they're kind, they seem interested in my development. I'd love to see their development happen. Like, I think we are mutually interested in each other's success. Then I add them to the database and then basically I merged them in to our drip stuff that was going out anyway. So like we send an e-newsletter out every month. So then they got that. We send evidence of success, like a little postcard that'll have a testimonial or a low days on market or a really high price sale for a neighborhood. We add them to that briefly. They're not in there forever, but we add them for a couple months. And at the end of my coffee, I'll say, hey, this was awesome. Like you seem like a great person. I'm so glad we got to know a little more about each other. I would love, and again, remember, I haven't talked about myself that much. They have talked about themselves. And it's like, I know we didn't talk too much about Storyhouse or we didn't talk too much about my team or my background. I would love the opportunity to sort of expose you to the way we do business. So what that would mean is getting our e-newsletter, having a couple postcards pop in the mail. I just want you to see how our business is done. So you learn a little bit more about that. I want to make sure it's okay with you because I don't want you to feel like it's spam. But if it's okay with you, I'll add you to these mailing lists. And, I let them witness that. I let them see these things happen, and which means they might get an invite to our client party if it falls during the several months that they're in the list. They might get an invite to a tailgate. They might get a pot buy gift. It just depends on what we're doing for our database at that time. But then they see what our company does and they decide if they like it or not.
Real estate has a lot of contracts. I want this podcast to have a social contract as well. Here's what I need from you. If you're listening to the show and you get something valuable out of it, or you hear something that you think, that's awesome, I want you to send me a DM on Instagram, or if you find my email, send it that way. The more feedback that I get helps me to put together better shows and attract better guests.
I love that so much. And I think that's like a key, like if you're not driving right now, like write this one down, because you preface people that you are going to be adding them to your list. And I think that's where like most people miss out on the follow-up.
Ask for permission. It's not just like immediately upload their name.
And you're getting them excited about it too. It's like, hey, like work into the conversation that like, education is your big thing. You want to keep your mission is to keep every single person in your community involved and educated on what the housing market is doing. But also like you guys are having a really great party in 2 months and you want to send them an invite for it. So watch out for this in your email, because like the person you're meeting with is going to get a ton of like networking and connectivity opportunities from it. And then they're excited to get that first email. Right. And they're not surprised by it.
Like, delete them. Yeah. It's like, because something that hurts my feelings, I shouldn't take it so personally. But if somebody like removes themselves from my e-newsletter, I'm like, oh my God, I failed them. I'm a terrible person. Like I must have sent terrible, like I beat myself up. But typically they only remove themselves if they never should have been on it in the first place. Like I never geared them or prepped them that they were going to receive it, or they remove themselves because they like moved out of Charlottesville, or like it's just no longer relevant. But typically I feel like it's usually because we just added someone to something that we had no business adding them to because we didn't have that permission from them yet, or we didn't have the relationship built, and then it just felt like trash.
Well, and I think like a lot of times we see a lot more of that marketing in like the super low end market where like you buy a bunch of crappy Zillow leads and then you try crappy marketing with them. And if it works 1 in 100 times, which it will, then you keep doing it.
So often that someday someone's going to raise their hand and be ready.
Yeah, but it's kind of like the golden rule. Like if I wanted to sell myself a $500,000 house in my neighborhood, I'm not going to put myself on a crappy email drip campaign with like information about homes in California, right? Like it's irrelevant to me. Like how do I want to be marketed to?
Well, and we've carried that out till the end of time. Now, I mean, it's been years and years and years. Every time I meet someone, I do a coffee, I just mention like, hey, I'd love for you to see how our business operates. If this is okay with you, I'd love to include you on it. And then, of course, if it's not relevant, just let us know and we'll remove it. But I want you to know how we operate the community. So if someone asks about who you'd recommend for real estate, I would just love to be amongst the people that you are considering, like that you're thinking about. So it's a really easy, it's not a hard press. It's just a gentle nudge towards us.
So I know that, a big part of it is like keeping in touch with these people after that initial coffee, and like the newsletter is part of it, but you do a really great job with like personal phone calls, texts, letters, events, other things. But you mentioned to me that something you improved in your business, right? Because I know we're always trying to improve, is that you started gauging your relationships, because you said you maybe had some that weren't as strong as you thought. Tell me more about that, because I think we all fall victim to like that. Like
a couple minutes, I'll tell you like how I got to that. But like, I realized I started thinking about, sometimes we hustle really, really hard and we start making a lot of money and things that feel like we're achieving lots of things. And it's like, okay, neat. But you have these moments and you're like, what is this all for? Right? Like, when is enough enough? When's there enough money? When's my team big enough? When do I have enough clients? Like, when is enough networking in a day enough? Like, when is enough enough? And I started thinking about like, I basically sometimes feel like the mayor of my town, right? I feel like I know everyone, but I've gone through a couple massive hardships in my life and I didn't feel like very many people showed up. And I think what that showed me about my life is that I had a huge amount of shallow relationships, but I didn't have very many deep relationships. So I was wide and shallow. And when you have hardships in your life and when like the rubber hits the road, you want to have some deep relationships, people that really care about you, really check in on you, really show up for you. And I started to think like, okay, is there value in me just being like surface level friends? I have 5,000 friends on Facebook. Like no more people can be my friend on Facebook. And you would think like, oh, this is the pinnacle of like, I'm super cool and popular. But it's like, what is the value in having 5,000 friends on Facebook if none of them care about you, right? And so I started thinking, well, I'm the common denominator in that. Like if none of them care about me, I'm the common denominator. I'm sure all of those people deeply care about other people in their lives.
Sounds like you're maybe describing a Taylor Swift song.
Oh, is that true?
I'm the problem, it's me.
I haven't caught up with her latest album, although I'm sure that I would agree with everything she says. But yeah, that was it. And I was like, well, like if I died tomorrow, who would show up at my funeral? Like, would it be the random 5,000 real estate agents that have seen me once in my life across the nation? No, like none of them would even notice. And I was like, all right, so what is the purpose of all of this? And that's when I just realized I was not in deep relationships. So I had to gamify the system for myself because I knew that I'm a phone phobic. I'm an introvert. I don't love talking to people about like random stuff and the weather and small talk, but I was trying to keep in touch with these people. I'm like, well, what am I supposed to say? Like, I just call them over and over again and chit chat. And then I'm like, well, that's wasting their time. That feels disrespectful for them. So I created a rubric for myself, and it's literally a Google spreadsheet that has a series of questions that I answer about people. And then I give myself a score on each of those people to figure out if I'm in deep relationship or not. So some of the questions, as an example, would be like, have they been to my office? Have I been to their office? Have they been to my home? Have I been to their home? Have I met their spouse? Do I know the names of their children? Have we done, if their spouse is cool and they are cool, have we done like a double date, like a couple's dinner or something like that? Have they sent me a referral? Have I ever sent their business a referral? Things like that are just like, okay, it tells me if I just know them surface level or not, but B, it also gives me like really direct things to talk to them about. So if I call you and I'm like, hey, Matt, instead of me calling every couple of weeks just to be like, hey, how's your life? It's like, hey, Matt, it just occurs to me that like, I know so much about you as a business person. I have so much respect for you as a business person. I've never seen your office or met your team. Like, is there a time that I could bring coffee by to you, or I could pop by and deliver some goodies or something? And it opens the door. It like tells me the things. Like, I think if you share a meal and you get belly to belly and you get in people's space and they get in your space, that's when you're building actual relationship, or at least you have the opportunity to. So it sort of just gave me a rubric of like things to talk about. So I didn't have that like resistance towards calling these people. It's like, I wanted to follow up. I wanted to keep in touch. I care about them. I want to learn about their life, but I didn't want to be a burden. I didn't want to annoy them with my phone calls, right? Because that puts you further from relationship with people. So that's kind of how we did it. And it's been fun for me. And then I tally up all the points. If I have yeses for those questions, I tally it all up. There's 10 questions. And I'm just trying to get every person closer to a 10, because I know that like, then I've poured into them a little bit. Like, they know that I care. They know I'm going the extra mile to meet their family, to meet their office, to invite them to my home. I know that I've done my best to try to pour into them. And then if the relationship doesn't blossom, that's okay. There's no judgment, but at least you tried, and you'll find the people that really do care to be in like deep, meaningful relationship with you and that give their time and pour back.
I love that you gamified it for yourself, because it gives you like a tangible thing to work on every week. Like, okay, I have these 300 people in my list, but I don't know. I need to find their spouse's name. I need to find their kids' names. I need to know what sports they're in. I need to figure out more of like how I can help them. And then you know what you're working towards when you're making those calls. Because like all of our brokers tell us, oh my gosh, call your past clients, call your database, but then they don't.
And you're like, about what?
Like, well, what the hell do I say? And so
well, the other problem, I would totally, A, I hate being on the phone, but B, I was like, well, if I call them, every single one of them is just going to ask me for an updated value of their home. And that's going to take me like half an hour for each one. I was like, that's not good. Like, if they're not planning on selling anytime soon, I, of course, am always happy to give them an updated valuation. But I feel like if you have nothing to say, and that's the thing you have in common, it's just going to become a massive homework assignment every time you call. And really, that's not the goal. The goal is to check in on people, make sure their lives are going okay, see if there are things you can help them with, like be in relationship, not just be a random realtor with data spewing at them all the time.
I like that. Don't just be a random realtor. I think that's fantastic. So what are you doing this year differently? So obviously the market has a little bit less inventory than it's had, although I did read that last week inventory ticked up for the first time in forever in many markets. But like, what are you doing differently? Like how have you adjusted either your marketing playbook? How are you working with your buyers or sellers differently? What's changing for you guys?
This year, a couple of things. We focused a ton on our national connection to realtors and worked on like inbound and outbound referrals, because, when market share is so low, if we can still make income from referrals going in and out and connecting people to great realtors elsewhere, there's enough inventory nationally for us to make a very good living. So we focused on that and hit up like a newsletter national. Like, we started just getting in front of people as the Charlottesville realtor they should know. And then we started talking to some of the aging realtors in our own market, because, we know NAR is predicting quite a bit of fallout. Like, we've got some weird stuff going on in our industry right now, to say the least. And it's a hard market. And a lot of these people are nearing retirement anyway and don't want to try to keep up with all of the technology and the whatever's coming with commission adjustments, whatever is coming down the pike. I just think there's a lot of people that are ready to hang it up. So we've been working on giving them a succession plan where we sort of help them ease out of the business over the course of a couple of years. And we'll pay them a higher commission split on the first year, slightly lower second year, a more regular commission, referral fee on the third year. And we're just trying to help them transition their business to a company that can take great care of their clients, but let them retire. And then it's like, they can hang their license on referral status and go network and play tennis and golf and like enjoy their lives a little bit, but still be generating an income. So we've just been trying to think of like, how do we take advantage of the fact that the inventory does suck and that a lot of our competitors are not going to stick it out through this market? Like, how can we be in front of those people and helping them make a living, but also helping take over a little more market share? I think of it as separation season. It's like, a lot of people are pulling back and retreating right now. It gives us a chance to separate further from the pack and gain more and more.
Well, that's one of the most interesting tactics I've heard in months. So what I love about that is if you talk to any realtor and they tell you like, what's the problem? Oh, there's too many agents, but they're not coming up with a solution.
Right.
You have a solution where you're giving them an out. You're providing
Like
other realtors
an out that has integrity, an out that has a plan, an out that they know they can count. Like, not every realtor would be able to do this, because if you've been a jerk in your marketplace and no one wants to work with you, then you're not going to get a lot of this business. But if you've been kind and polite and you're responsive and you're known for taking great care of people, it gives agents a super easy out. So yeah, we've just been trying to find ways to help them do it with grace and in a way that they feel an integrity with. But of course, it's just taking on more market share, and we have the bandwidth to do it right now. So that's been really fun.
How are you coaching your newer realtors at your brokerage this year?
We're focused. I mean, it sounds so basic, and it's like we're focusing on face-to-face, belly-to-belly, and phone calls. It's like, go be in the community. If you don't have an event to go to, go look on Meetup online, go to the Facebook events, like go to the Chamber of Commerce, figure out what's happening, go look on, your local community news board to see what free events are coming up or things that you can participate in. Create a kickball team, create a book club, create like a faith-based community, whatever you're into, like gather people around it. And it's just expose yourself over and over and over again, and just constantly be making new connections. Because newer agents, the problem is they don't have a lot of people to call yet. So you've got to go to the community, get the business cards, follow up, ask for the coffees. It's like you're starting from scratch, but really it's the same thing I did in my first couple of years. And if you just do it, it's a really, really successful plan. I think most people just do it briefly, get a couple leads, and then kind of get down a rabbit hole, like servicing those leads, and then it all falls off. So it's like,
right. Well, I mean, most people ride that roller coaster of, they have nothing going on. They have a deal or two. They get another deal because they were busy, and then they have nothing for 3 months because they stopped marketing.
An open house, so that ties them up forever. So they're not prospecting anymore. So yeah, for us, we hold all of our, and if you've been exposed to the core coaching is a company I've been coached by for many, many years. I am now a coach for. But if you've been exposed to the core at all, many, many productive realtors across the nation they have the greatness tracker, which it's the same as Brian Buffini, Tom Ferry, like all of the real estate, really all business coaches have the same. It's like, you've got to have some face-to-face appointments. You've got to have some break breads or share some food, share some meals, and you've got to do phone calls, which means you've got to have people to call. And we don't really prescribe to the idea of cold calling. I would much rather you go to an event and gather contact information from a few people, and then the next day call to follow up. So it's at least a warm call, and they'll take your call. But yeah, it's really like basics. Like, it's not rocket science. You just have to make enough connection. You have to take enough at-bats.
The Neighborhood Realtor Podcast is proudly made possible by the support of our sponsors, Treadstone Funding and Neighborhood Loans, two amazing Midwest mortgage companies that now have offices all around the country. If you're a realtor and you'd like to learn more about connecting with one of our lenders, DM me at mattmusket88 and I'll connect you with someone in your market. If you're a lender and you want to join the right mortgage company, DM me and I'll connect you as well.
This week I went to a networking event. I met like 3 or 4 really interesting people. I got home. I don't even think I got home. I think I was in my car. I added a couple of them on social media who I could find easily. Right. And then I emailed myself to say, tomorrow morning, send them an interesting rephrasement of something we talked about in conversation.
Yeah.
And or ask them a question, be like, oh my gosh, when I add you on social media, I noticed that you have a 5-year-old too. Like, which school are you guys at? Like, we just started also. Like, figure out what to say.
You have daily time built into your schedule to do the follow-up from that. We were just talking yesterday about like networking, partying with a purpose, networking with a purpose. Like, go to a networking event, and in the 5 minutes when the speaker's making an introduction, scan the rooms, scan people's name tags, Google them. Like, literally, sometimes you have 5 minutes when somebody's introducing, the sponsors are talking, like, Google the people, figure out who the people are that you most need to connect to, like who owns the biggest company in town, who's an estate attorney, who's a CPA, right. Like, be strategic and go hunt them down. And if you don't have name tags or you don't have that ability, go to the person who organized the event and say, hey, Bob, I'm at this PTA event and I've really been needing to meet like Susie Smith all these years. I'm not sure which person she is. I would love to introduce myself. Can you point me to Susie Smith? So it's like, go and have a purpose. It's not just like chit chat with whoever looks the loneliest, right? It's like, have a purpose and then have the dedicated time the next day to follow up and make sure you do something with those.
Well, I love that because I think so many of us go to like these networking events and then afterwards we're I didn't get anything out of it. Well, you didn't know, if you don't know what you want to get out of a meeting or an event, you're not going to get it. So anytime someone invites me, I'll usually say to them like, okay, awesome. Like, who should I know here? Like, who's your closest personal connection here? Who can you connect me with that you think we could have a mutually beneficial relationship with?
And even
if shocking, it works.
If your goal is, I need to collect 5 business cards from this event, knowing that the next day you have time built in your schedule to follow up with each of those 5 people and invite them to coffee, then that's 5 new connections that you just established. That's a massive win. It's way more valuable than just chit-chatting to random people and then not really knowing their names or their company, not remembering anything afterwards. Even you could go chit-chat to 25 people and feel like, oh, I was a social butterfly. I was being seen, or I'm seeing and being seen. But if you don't have any new actual like tangible connections out of it, then I'm not so sure that served the purpose. So yeah, I try to tell our folks to be super efficient. Even if you can only spend 20 minutes at a networking event and then you have to go pick up your kids or show a house, if you can get a couple of business cards and then you appropriately follow up with them, like you just do that a couple times a week and like think of how you expand, your
database grows. I mean, like NAR consistently says that like the average realtor, and hopefully none of us are average, the average realtor closes like 7% of their database every year if they reach out 8 quality times, not spam. So if you add 5 people a week, that's like an insane amount of money in extra closings at the end of the year. And I feel like we're in minute like 30 of the podcast, and I want to be respectful of your time. We kind of glossed over something. Everyone listening should actually listen to you, Sasha. You did $140 million in sales last year with your team. You don't have a gigantic team. You're not in Miami or California where the average price point's like $2 million. I mean, the average price in your market in the Charlottesville area is around a little higher than 400. So you guys did like close to 300 units by simply being a presence in the community and using the strategies that you talked about today. Like, that's why people should listen to you.
It's valuable to say this. We don't do any paid, we don't pay for any leads. Like, our entire team is every deal. Well, not every deal, but we'll get some people off of a sign call or something where we're advertising our listings. All of our business is referral based. It's from our current sphere of people we know, and then the people that they know. Like, we don't pay, and it's just a much more enjoyable lifestyle, because when we were doing cold leads and like Zillow or whatever, like online leads, we did Commissions Inc. We used to have way more like online flood of leads coming in. It's like you're always spending your time proving yourself and justifying that you're not sketchy and that you're a good person. And it's like, if we can cut through all of that and already have a warm referral or a warm connection to people when the business comes in, then we can spend our time educating that person and making sure they're making informed real estate decisions and then building our relationship further with them. And that's just way more joyful, right? Like,
I love that. So Sasha, if someone listening in another city, state has someone moving to the Charlottesville area or within, 20 or 30 miles, how would they get a hold of you for that referral?
Yeah. So, our phone number is 434-260-1435, but really, I would say our website is best. So storyhousere.com. And that kind of sources you down to the buying side, the selling side. Are you still several months out? But that's the best way to get in touch. And then in terms of like speaking, core coaching, that sort of thing, SashaTripp.com. That's my own personal brand tied to like the real estate community if somebody needs a public speaker at their event or what have you. So those are the 2 routes.
And I know on your website, you also have like some things agents can just kind of grab. So you have a bidding war bundle. Tell people what that is and like why they need it. I think it's the name is self-explanatory on why they need it, but
the bidding, well, they certainly probably needed it a little bit more like last year, but this spring, I feel like we're going to have chaos again. I don't know how you guys are feeling right now. I feel like a lot of buyers are a little burnt out, so we're not seeing as crazy bidding wars, but bidding war bundle basically templates that set expectations for the seller themselves, like what it's going to look like spreadsheets where you can compare every term of the offer side by side, templates that go out to the agents themselves that explain to them like when offers are going to be reviewed, what it's going to look like, is it best and final, are they going to have opportunities to change terms, are we going to come back to people? So it's basically like start to finish, every person that needs to be communicated in that situation or communicated with. It's setting their expectations properly, and then a place where we can condense all the information so our seller can make a very fast and easy decision. We had many offers where we would get 20 or many houses where we'd get 20 or 30 offers. And it would literally take, I could speak to my client for 10 minutes and they could make the decision because we had narrowed it down and fine-tuned it so perfectly. So yeah, it's just time saving, and it makes your client feel like they can make a super informed decision. Yeah, thank you. Thanks for having me.